All right, here we go. Another episode of Canada on the Rocks. I am your host, Thadi Kuder, and today we are joined with Yasmin Mansouri, Languages of Life. So, Yasmin, we've been talking off camera for quite some time, and I just want to know, I want to tell people the story about Languages of Life. When did you take over? What's it like? What is it about?
Okay. So Languages of Life is a interpretation and translation firm. We provide interpretation and translations in 172 languages all over Canada.
172 languages.
Yeah, that's including dialects as well, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so for example, like I know Arabic has like 23, 24 different dialects.
So that is not including Arabic because most of our Arabic interpreters speak all dialects except where you go into like Morocco and Algeria and stuff. But that is African dialects and stuff. So
172, that's like it's crazy number.
It is.
So tell me more about the services.
So mostly we provide services to organizations such as Ottawa Police, Royal Ottawa Mental Health Center, Cornwall Police, these organizations. And sometimes we do conferences or simultaneous interpretations. We do document translations as well. Individuals who come, they're newcomers. Sometimes they need documents translated, such as passports, birth certificates, driver's license, driver's history. We do that as well. We don't do a lot of marketing because we're more on the organizational end of things, and companies that use us also refer us to other companies. But we're busy doing that. And a lot of times we do services and start little campaigns to help newcomers that are coming because we get a lot of newcomers and that don't speak English and have a demand for help and stuff. So
I'm saying this because I've experienced this when I first came to Canada like 25 years ago, 26 years ago. I'm dating myself. But, at that point, like, it's hard, man. It's like when you come into a new country and you don't know the language, you don't know what's going on. Everything is a chore. Everything is like, and then add to it the language, right?
Yep.
Like, it's one thing to be moving. And I get that all the time from my job. Like, people move all over the place, but like move and also don't speak the language and also the weather situation and also this and also that. It's just like a whole cultural shock.
For sure.
So how do you guys engage with those organizations?
So it's a little easier because prior to working at Languages of Life and owning Languages of Life, I also worked at Immigration Canada. So I have a lot of connections there. So what happens is they'll have, maybe they're getting 100 people from Syria next month or 2 months from now. So then I kind of know what's going to be happening. And then what I do is I speak to the interpreters and I say, hey, are you guys on board? Let's do this. We're going to help them out, this and that, and kind of organize something with it. But with respect to services, if anybody calls my organization and says, hey, we're a new family, we don't know what we're doing, this and that, we have some documents, we take it. Or even sometimes we have the sponsorship of 5 program. There's 5 people sponsoring a family from Syria or wherever. We always do the documents for them.
I've never heard of that program, sponsoring a 5. Can you tell me a little bit more about it?
Yeah, so sometimes what happens is 5 people will get together, 5 friends, and they say we want to help a family. So there is that opportunity. Mind you, I don't know right now if it's on hold or not. The last one we dealt with was about 2 months ago. So what happens is they are in communication with this family who is in Syria or Turkey at the time because they've left Syria.
Yeah.
And they will have to all put money into a bank account and to show the government that they will be able to financially support this family. And instead of one person putting everything on the line, it's 5 people. The case is stronger. And they have to do like all their translations. And usually the family they're supporting is like a family of 4 or 5 or 6 people, mom and dad and kids. And so they have to do all their translations. So sometimes we help with that because it can get pretty pricey to do all their translations. So we just support them and kind of cover the charges for that.
Yeah. That's like you guys are working with the most important thing in anybody's life. It's the ability to speak, the ability to interpret themselves, the ability to like actually convey a message.
Yeah.
How do you feel that you carry that forward as far as like,
Honestly, it's a very rewarding feeling because as you mentioned, my family also came to Canada and times are different. I find that now with respect to some things, it's easier. And with respect to some things, it's more difficult because back then you didn't have an organization like Catholic Center for Immigrants that had, maybe a caseworker that speaks Somali, a caseworker that speaks Arabic, Already when you are going into a country that you know nothing about, it could be pretty scary. I was born and raised in Ottawa, but my entire family moved here. And when they tell me, like when my mom tells me, I'm like, I wouldn't be able to do that because you're moving somewhere, full responsibility of your family, going somewhere where you don't know anything, as you mentioned, it's pretty scary on its own, let alone when you have to deal with the bank and the government and this and that. And back home, it's different. Like I visited and it's like you go into the bank and everybody speaks your language and you figure it out. And mind you, there may not even be a lineup. Here, there's a line ticket, like from that smallest thing to like substantial things, it could be pretty scary. So when I see these people come and they're like, they have that fear and they don't really know what to do or how to do it or anything. And when they just right off the bat, when you speak their language, it gives them a sense of comfort. Like, I know you. Like, there's a connection.
We have a saying back home that it translates into, like, if you know somebody's language, you are definitely safe around them.
Yeah.
Because you know for a fact, no matter what, like, they're going to be, like, if they're going to talk shit about you.
Yeah.
You're going to understand it. You're going to be able to say, like, okay, I should, start looking for the door. Thing.
Yeah.
So how did you guys, like, I know you took over the business like 10 years ago. Tell me a little bit more about the takeover. How was that? What is that like? Because it's important to me. Like, I do a lot of commercial real estate.
Yeah.
It's important to me to show people what, buying a business looks like.
Yeah. So it was out of the norm because Languages of Life at that time, so it's been around since 1979, so about 44 years. And it was doing amazing. The previous owner was doing great. Mind you, as she was getting older, the organization was not doing so well. It wasn't very involved in the community. It was more involved with, just interpretation and translations for OPS, Ottawa Police, and the Royal Mental Health Center. But near the end, as she was getting older, the organization was growing with her and it was getting older as well. And it wasn't really up to date with things. So it was in a really dark spot for the organization. At that time, previous to taking over, I was an assistant for that organization. Nobody wanted it. It was in a rough spot. I took over and I revamped things at that time. So the takeover wasn't really a typical takeover of an organization. I always like to think that it's easier when you're building one than taking one that's not doing well and trying to redo it.
There's always something to be said about that. Like if you're starting a brand new business, you can, the world is your oyster.
Exactly.
You can
do what you want.
Do it whichever way you'd like.
Yeah.
You can focus on marketing. You can focus on whatever you want to focus on.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, what you put in is going to come out on the other side. But if you're taking over, you're dealing with some nuances that's already been there. Like, sometimes it might hurt. It might help. You never know. It might be a hindering, and it might be also the best thing that happened when you take it over. So that's interesting. So back then, how many languages were you guys serving, and how did that change?
It had just reached 140, and now it's 172. Just going back to what you mentioned, actually, it's kind of like a surprise box.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're getting when you open it.
You never know.
And everyone was used to someone that was 82 years old. So when I went into places, I know if people are going to listen to this, they're going to find out my trick. But I used to sit at tables with people much older than me. And you can just tell when they sit with you. Because I was, 20 at that time? And people, when they sit with you, they're already like, you don't know anything. And most of them in that industry were males. And when you sit at the table, they have this demeanor and you're kind of like, oh my God, okay, so I used to wear fake glasses to kind of look more professional, do what I needed to do so that at least they would listen. And then when I spoke, then they're like, okay. And it was different. Yeah, but you always had to seek that opportunity, right? So it was a surprise box for sure when I opened it up.
It's interesting. It's just, again, because sometimes it could hockey stick. And sometimes it could just flop completely.
For sure. Yeah.
So you're definitely kind of hit the nail on the head with the whole surprise box. Like you never know what you're getting into.
You don't know what you're getting.
So 172 languages. Again, it still baffles my mind, like the amount of languages. Are they all sort of like the interpreters and the translators? Are they all sort of contract workers, or how does that work for you?
So they're freelance workers. We have about 400 active in the organization, most of which are located in Ottawa, Toronto, and Montreal. And they're You would say they're contract workers.
Just so like at least we understand for the folks that are watching, like what does it take to be a good interpreter or translator or what have you?
Cultural knowledge. So sometimes we have individuals that are born and raised here and they speak the language fluently, but they have to understand the culture.
Mm-hmm.
That is like the most important thing I look for, as well as making sure that they are fluent in the language, because some dialects have progressed and they have slang in the language. And there is also that like the root language that was there. But now in some languages, you'll see that there's like English in the language as well, you know? So if it's someone that's been there maybe 20 years ago, they won't have that information or that knowledge to be able to communicate properly.
Yeah.
So language, cultural knowledge for sure, and also knowledge about here, because when you're dealing with the client, you have to, you know, be able to communicate everything properly. Sometimes you even need to clarify things.
So, and what sort of background do they normally have, like as far as education, things like that, or is that?
Some of them are doctors. Some of them now in Ottawa are cab drivers, but they weren't where they came from. That we have a testing that they have to complete. So when once they get on board with us, they'll do a testing. There's an interview. There's about 4 steps before they're actually an active interpreter or translator with our firm. But yeah, sometimes you won't believe the person that's a right fit. It's because of what they bring to the table and the knowledge that they have. And I don't like to say that there's a specific type of person, because we have people from different walks of life that fit the position really well. And we may have someone that, you know, is, I don't know, not a professional employee right now, but they're a perfect person for a family who's seeking help for their young kids, you know?
Like when you go back for, I don't know, the last 10 years or so, like what's one language that just keeps popping up for you?
Arabic.
How so? Why? Tell me more.
I think over the last several years, for fortunate and unfortunate reasons, we have seen a lot of newcomers to Canada that are Arabic-speaking individuals. Fortunate that for some, it's a great opportunity that they're able to come to Canada, and unfortunately for some that it's not by choice that they're coming to Canada. But there's a huge demand for them. The population of individuals in Ottawa that speak Arabic, that require the services that we assist, it's a high demand. With the police force, with, you know, law firms, with doctors' offices. When there is a huge fluctuation of immigrants, we see a huge service. Like in Gatineau, if you tell me, there is a huge service demand for Spanish. That's the number one language that we cater to.
It is right now in Gatineau. I think Spanish and Portuguese is the second one.
Yep, Portuguese. That's the second one.
Yeah, like anywhere you go in Hull, there is at least a little pocket of a couple of Spanish people here.
I didn't even know that until we kept getting requests for Spanish. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. There's so many Spanish-speaking
and it's been going like this. Like I think this has been going like that. The sort of the demand for that has been going on for the last 20 years in Hull and Gatineau.
Yeah. Also, mind you, I think that when you see these newcomers coming, a lot of them, I think there is a flaw in our government system. Not to make this a political podcast, but...
It's a free form.
Okay, perfect. So I do...
Watson going to get canceled.
No, I do see that we just bring them. They don't know what they're walking into. Like, they don't know as a family... Sometimes things that are culturally okay where they come from are not okay here. And I don't think that they're at fault. Unfortunately, they get in trouble for it, but they don't know where the line is, what the boundaries are, so they're just learning and then all of a sudden one of them gets charged or something, or, you know, and that's how we deal with them. So if a police officer pulls somebody over and they don't speak any English or sometimes French or anything, they call our 911 service, and an officer gets an interpreter from my firm to do the interpretation and translation.
Like right on the spot?
Right on the spot.
Wow.
So 2 to 4 minutes for 911. Well, no, sorry, 911 is urgent. And then if it's a call back, it's 2 to 4 minutes. And then sometimes they book in advance and they have a service required, and we cater to that as well.
So you guys also get involved with like 911 calls, like emergency?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Ottawa Police, Gatineau Police, Cornwall Police, bunch of them.
It's amazing in 2 different ways. One is like at least we know that these people are going to get service the way they should be. At least they're understood, they're heard, they're whatever situation they are, it's
Yeah.
explained properly.
Yeah.
And then hopefully they don't, and then this is because we see this all the time, like when you're looking at movies and like whatever, like people get completely ran over by the police because of the fact that they just don't understand what the hell is going on.
Yep.
Sometimes.
I mean, as English speaking, when I see an officer, it's kind of scary. Even when I'm not doing anything wrong, I'm like, oh crap, they're the cop.
For my friends that are cops, they hate me when I say this. I hate cops. Like, and they're friends. I have friends that are cops, and I'm like, I'm sorry, that's your job, but like,
yeah, I
we're
could.
friends.
You know what? Knowing what I know now, I used to want to be a cop, mind you, but a police officer. Some of them don't like it when I say cop, but now I'm glad I'm not a police officer because I find that I see what sometimes they have to deal with, and I give them credit. You know what I mean? Like I understand what they go through and the people they deal with, and they deal with some tough people. So I can understand why they have that demeanor, and they can't come and be like, oh, this person's nice, so let me be nice, and this person's. So I understand that it's pretty challenging, but I'm right there with you. Some of them are really nice, and some of them are, but that's like every other industry too. So
yeah, it's very telling when the police officer comes in and like they're already fearing like, they're gonna talk down to me. It's gonna happen. I'm an idiot. Like, but you're not. It's at the end of the day, in my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong on this one, you're providing a service.
Yeah.
You're a public servant providing a service, which happens to be protecting.
Yeah.
Which happens to be, preventing issues from happening.
Yeah.
So why don't we just come down a notch and actually talk to
people like they understand. Yeah, for sure. I can understand that. Yeah.
What are some of and again, I don't want you to give me details. It's just more of like for entertainment only.
Yeah.
What are some of the most interesting calls you've got?
That's a tough one. Interesting in what way? Like interesting and
like this is funny, or like wow, I can't believe this just happened.
It's tough to say because it goes into a little bit of the confidentiality thing. But okay. I will say for sure that like sometimes because we don't deal with a lot of like the fun stuff, I would say. But before I wanted to be a police officer, because it's a very important, and I'm sure you understand this more than myself because of what you do. When you want to do something or when you're in a management position, you have had to experience what you're going to get people to do. Like you have to understand the ins and outs of it before you get someone to do it.
Yeah. Well, you can't manage if you don't really know
exactly what you're managing. Exactly. But some people are in a management position and they're telling someone, okay, go do the books. But you have had to do it before you see the final result. So when I first started the organization, one of the first things I did was I went on ride-alongs to see what the officer is going through and to understand if an interpreter is needed on call, how will it work? What's convenient? Officer to call the interpreter to call the officer, all the logistics behind it. And so I was in a ride-along once and there was an arrest. And when there was an arrest, there was an individual in the back seat, and he just kept swearing at me, thinking I'm a police officer. And the officer had gone in. I was in the front. The accused was in the back. He was drunk. And he kept swearing at me, thinking I was an officer. I guess he didn't like officers either. But swearing at me nonstop and calling me like a rookie cop and I'm listening and I'm scared out of my mind, thinking that this guy is going to bang on the glass or something. And the officer is inside. So I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. But those were part of the interesting things. Some of the things I deal with are more like surprising, that how interesting in the sense that how do people do these things? More of like fun, interesting. And it makes me a little bit overprotective of my own children and my family, knowing that these things can happen.